Hi, it's Jesse. Is it a better time yet?
Yeah, hi Jesse. Sorry I made you wait.
Oh, you're good. Hi, it's nice to hear your voice. I'm Jesse. I'm from the National Community Reinvestment Coalition, and I'm really excited to be speaking to you today. I
Uh-huh.
I'm doing an interview series with different leaders and organizers about necessary shifts for inclusion and collaboration within the justice movement. And I thought you would be a really good voice for this series. Do you have any questions for me before we get started?
No, go ahead.
All right. My first question is, who are leaders or role models that showed you how to work with people of different backgrounds or bridge different identity politics within your work?
Well, I think I kind of learned that just by growing up in with poor people and being from a poor family myself. I grew up after the Depression, where everybody was pretty much people pretty much not didn't have a lot of money right after the Depression. Remember, they had to work two jobs in order to be able to support us as a single parent, and all the kids that I grew up with were poor. So you might say that that was my life. And then, of course, working with farm workers, which I also did for many decades. So this is kind of you might say a lifetime of learning with poor people.
Another question I have for you is, have you seen any shifts recently in the justice movement that currently are really exciting to you?
Well, I think everything that's going on right now is very exciting when you think of all of the marches, the Black Lives Matter, the Me Too movement, the young people that are marching for gun control. I mean, everything is just like, it's like, I like to say to people that you went to the 60s, guess what, we're back, because there's so much movement that's going on right now. And I like the idea also that it's, where back in the 60s we had what I call a cultural revolution. I think right now it's more focused on economics. And of course, one of the areas that, that it's really there, but maybe not as visible, is the whole issue about the income inequality. We saw a lot of that with the Occupy movement, but now we see all of these big attacks on the labor movement, which are very, very threatening to the democracy of the United States of America. Because if we don't have labor, if we don't have organized labor, we don't have a middle class, and if we don't have a middle class, we don't have a democracy. So I think that's one of the biggest threats, and I think people aren't really focused on that as much as they should be.
That's a perfect quote, since that's the main focus of our organization and the membership that'll be reading this interview. I think they'll love that. Thank you. Yeah, we're an economic justice org first and foremost. On the flip side, what are some of the areas? Sorry, what?
Yeah, could we just enlarge that a little bit? I mean, we have to look at what percentage of people are now covered by are represented by labor unions, and I think it's maybe like 4% in the private sector. And these attacks that are happening on the labor movement now, which the Supreme Court issued a decision on Janus versus AFSCME, it's going to be decided on in June. And when Scott Walker in Wisconsin, when they passed the legislation preventing unions from collecting dues from their members on checkoff, checking off the dues from their paychecks, I think the union membership for public workers dropped by 60%. So this is a huge threat, because if the Supreme Court decides that labor unions, this would include the teachers union, by the way, that they cannot deduct dues from workers' paychecks, that will be devastating to the whole country. And so we don't know how that's going to go. When is their publication coming out?
So I'll be seeing you speak at the Equity Summit on Thursday. I hope to add to the article from there and to release the week after or the week after that. So it will definitely be before the June Supreme Court conversation or decision.
Good.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I think we have to remind people, well, where we got the 8-hour day, with the Haymarket riots in Chicago, where we got the weekends, But we've got unemployment insurance, disability insurance, Social Security, safety standards, workers' compensation, public education. And if we didn't have any of that, we wouldn't, organized labor are the ones that fought for all of these benefits that workers take for granted today. And but we wouldn't have them if unions had not existed.
So the next question, we just jumped right into it, that I was going to ask is, on the flip side, where are we further behind? Where are we losing ground? And also, where do you think that we're losing ability to have collaboration and mutual respect in either sort of the state politics that you work in, or our national political arena?
I don't think so much it's a lack of respect. I think it's a lack of knowledge. I mean, I speak to a lot of millennials, and when it comes to labor, they have really no knowledge of how labor unions were organized, what they went through. And that's kind of so you kind of have this kind of I'm going to call it a bigotry, but in some cases it's not intentional. It's just ignorance, because they don't really know what the background of labor unions are or how we got to where we are, and they don't understand all of these laws that have been passed to keep labor from organizing, or workers from organizing.
And do you think that that's primarily because of the way it's been cut out of our educational curriculum, or censored in our curriculum? Is there a way we can address that?
Yes, definitely. That's one way to address it, but I think we need to do more than that. I think we have to have some popular education outside of our high schools, not only as it comes to labor unions, but also when it comes to racism. Because you can't separate the whole idea of poverty from you can't separate that from race also, because so many of our poor people have to be people of color.
Absolutely. Okay. The next question I did have for you, and we started to get into this, was if you look at Black Lives Matters, Me Too, Never Again, and the Poor People's Campaign, is there any advice you would give them from your time organizing with Community Service Organization or the United Farm Workers? Or are there things that they're doing that you just want to amplify and think are already a good example?
Well, I think that these are all like part of the movements that are going on right now. But I think we should also, in terms of my organizing background, I think somehow you've got to have some stability to organizations. So, movements are great, but at some point they've got to be institutionalized. And I'll give you some examples. If you look at the organizations that started in the 60s, like the women's reproductive rights, So now you have organizations that are still around, like Planned Parenthood, the Feminist Majority, some of the women's groups that are still here. Same thing with the LGBT movement. You have a movement, but then you had organizations that came out of it, like the Human Rights Campaign, the Equality California, and other organizations like that. The farm workers movement's another good example. You still have like a union that came out of that has now been in existence now for 50 years. And so I think that so some of these movements, I hope that they will result in having some stable organization that will continue after the excitement and the exhilaration of the movement is over.
I love this. I'd love to dive into this a little bit deeper real quick. What does that transition look like, and how did the work change from when you felt like you were organizing as part of a activist movement to when your guys' work became an organization, it became an institution? What does that transition need, and what are the benefits of making that jump?
I think that's a $64 question. And actually, in terms of the farm workers, we started out as an organization with a constitution and bylaws. So we started out as an organization from the very beginning. So And I know it's easier with labor unions because you have I call it economic glue, which is the dues that workers pay. So you always have the resources to keep the organization going. Uh, I think with other organizations it's a little bit more difficult because that you might say that's why it's a $64 question. How can you keep organizations going economically? You know, in terms of having some kind of an economic base. We know, like with Planned Parenthood right now, now that the president has said that they're not going to give them funding from the government anymore, we don't know whether they'll be able to continue on that. Hopefully, they will file a lawsuit to prevent them from doing that. So, you know, I think Planned Parenthood has to think, well, how are we going to be able to continue? And I think with all nonprofit organizations, it's very difficult for them to continue without resources. So, yeah, I mean, that is the big question about how these organizations can continue. I think we look at the Occupy movement, which is a very important movement in terms of getting the message across to the whole of the country about the 1% and the 50% that control all the control 90% of the wealth of the United States of America. You know, that message was so important, but how can we continue that message? One way, of course, again, we can continue the messages through labor organizations, which are groups that are really instituted. And again, they have, you know, the chapter bylaws and procedures of how they can contain and grow their organizations. But with other groups, I mean, that are movement groups, they're not, like I said before, institutionalized, so I think it makes it more difficult. But I think that is a big question that we have to answer.
That charter and the bylaws and how they existed in their original form, can I find that online, or is that something your organization can send me? I'd love to read sort of what the first example of those bylaws looked like.
Okay, you mean like for labor unions?
Specifically for your guys' organization, when I was asking, you said that when you guys started, you had a charter from the very beginning.
Uh-huh.
Do you know if that exists online or if there's a copy of what it looked like originally still?
Are you talking about the United Farm Workers or about my organization?
I think I'm first asking about the United Farm Workers, but if not that as an example, I'd also be interested in your foundation.
Okay. I think let me check with our attorneys. I think it's possible because I think it's all public, you know?
Okay.
All public. Mm-hmm.
Cool.
And basically what that just means is you have rules by which your organization is going to work. Basically, you know, that's what your bylaws do. Is it just lays out the principles of your organization and how you're going to be able to work. You know.
Okay, so in the documentary, Dolores, you often speak about being one of the only women in a leadership role. When did you realize that gender was an important part of your position, maybe different than the other leaders? And do you have advice for women who choose to work in a place that often makes them the only woman at the table?
Let me put it this way. I think there were a lot of women in leadership roles in the United Farm Workers, but not necessarily on the executive board, where, you know, major decisions are being made. We had a lot of leaders. I mean, we had women that ran field offices, that ran the medical plan, they were in leadership roles, but they were not like at the executive decision of making decisions for the whole organization. And I think you're asking me that when did I always advocated for women when I was with the United Farm Workers, especially getting women on our ranch committee, because when we signed a contract, we would set up a committee and to make sure that we had women on that committee, if there were women in that particular company that were in the workforce, to make sure that we had women on the committee. I think at the executive level, I'm trying to think of what year that would have been, probably in the 80s when I thought, or in the probably in the early 80s, that we needed to have more women on the board, and started advocating for that. And it's kind of, one thing that's kind of interesting when you look at movement, and not only the farm workers movement, but I think all movements, the civil rights movement, had some of the same phenomena, where you have women that are in the leadership and they're on the front lines, but when the organization becomes institutionalized, then all of a sudden you look around and what happened to all the women? It seems like the people that then take the executive positions are all men.
Maybe that's something that we can get right during this second version of the 60s.
Yeah, oh, definitely. I'm not even worried about that. I think it's definitely going to happen.
Did you see that across other movements in the first round of the 60s, the actual 60s, that when all of these different groups, aside from maybe Planned Parenthood, when they became institutionalized, that evaporation occurred? Evaporation of women in leadership in executive positions?
Yeah, there's a lot of literature on that and writings by different women that were involved in the civil rights movement. Just think of the big march on Washington when Dr. King spoke. You know, the famous when he did his "I Have a Dream" speech. Mm-hmm. How many women spoke at that march?
I'll be honest. This is my gap as a younger person. I had no idea.
Yeah.
Was it well represented?
No, women were not represented.
Okay.
I think they may have had maybe one or two speakers.
Even though they were much more well represented within the organization, the organizing of the march that got everyone to Washington?
Yes, exactly. Mm-hmm. And I think in a way that's great because, you know, we can look at that and then we know that we can't repeat those same mistakes. And women are not going to allow it. And we know when we have women in leadership, you're going to have more decisions that are going to be more, I'm going to make up a word here. Well, there's more, whatever organization it is, if you have, and when I use the word women, I'm going to say the word feminist because the Sarah Palins of the world, right? We just don't want to say women. But and then have feminists on those decision-making boards, then the decisions that are being made are going to be better for women and children.
So I want to continue on this theme of feminism for a minute. I was thinking about how you shared your stage with Gloria Steinem. You've also shared your stage with different leaders from the civil rights movement. When differences in the outcomes, or not differences in the outcomes, but when difference in your ideologies arose, how did you maintain solidarity? Was there times when sort of working so close to others' causes made you expand your viewpoint, change your mind, even change your own priorities?
Oh, absolutely. And I have to give credit to Eleanor Smeal, who's the head of the Feminist Majority and the president of the Feminist Majority, because, you know, between her and Gloria Steinem, they definitely got me to transition from my position of being anti-abortion to realizing that abortion is a right that all women have. All women have to have that right to medical access if they need it.
Had that been previously a barrier to working together?
No, it wasn't. And sometimes we have to work. I'll give you another example. When we talk about the abortion issue, we work closely with the Catholic Church when it comes to immigration policies. But when it comes to issues of reproductive rights or gay rights, then of course we have to separate, you know, from them on those issues.
Do you find that in your proximity as allies, you stand a better chance of sort of shifting those peers' opinions, or do you have to sort of mix and match. This is where we're going to be in agreement, and this is where we're going to disagree, and that doesn't stop us from walking forward together. Like, I'm trying to tease out this notion of when there isn't alignment, I guess, when there isn't perfect alignment, is the priority to spend time finding common ground, or just to hash out where you're going to agree and disagree?
Yeah, I think that what you just mentioned, I think you have to decide, okay, I'll give you a really good example here in the Central Valley, California. We're doing a lot of different projects. We're working on stopping the school to prison pipeline, redistricting. Yet we've sued our local school board on the suspension and expulsion of African American and Latino children. We've also sued our board of supervisors on the lack of representation on our county supervisorial seats. We've sued our current high school district again on redistricting. And on these issues, we work in collaboration with other organizations. One of them is a group called Faith in Action, which is all of the churches that come together under that banner. Well, guess what? They don't work with us on our gay rights projects that we do, These are separate and apart from, and they don't support us on those projects, and we don't expect them to support us because of, they have the Catholic Church as part of their coalition. And these are evangelical churches also. Right? We work together with them on the education issues, civic engagement, in terms of getting people registered to vote in other projects. But when it comes to reproductive rights for women and gay rights, we just don't. We know that they can't support us, and we don't expect them to. So when it comes to voting and things of that nature, we can't work together.
Ooh, I actually just had, this isn't in my notes, but a question just came up to me while you were speaking about this. I know in an interview that I read with you, you spoke about, or you got in trouble for a statement about how all Republicans don't like Latinos, don't advocate for Latinos. I'm curious, with your Farmers Party, like the people you are representing in the worker strikes, was that a combination of people who identified as Republicans and Democrats? Like, was there political diversity there?
No, not really. I shouldn't say that.
I won't put it in the notes if it's not the right. I don't know. I'm curious.
No, it's okay. It's okay. I remember way back when, I think way back in the 70s when George Wallace, remember, he was that very racist guy from...
I do remember him, unfortunately, yes.
Yeah, well, I remember there was him, and he had another guy that was more right-wing than him. He was running for president or something. And we had a group of farm workers, I think, in Florida, that voted for George Wallace. It was really funny, because they said that the other guy that was even worse than him. I can't remember who that was. And we have had Republicans over the years that have supported us. They were kind of the moderate Republicans. There was a guy named McCloskey here from California. And so over the years we've had it. But it's been like individuals, not the party itself. The Republican Party has pretty much opposed everything that we've ever done.
That brings me to another question I did have in my notes, which is, in this administration, there are losses every day on behalf of the working class and communities of color. Were there political adversaries in the midst of your career that just seemed to be unraveling all your hard work? And when there was, how did you fight back, and what was the outcome?
I think we see that happening as we speak right now, with all of these executive orders that Trump is doing, and with Scott Pruitt, being in the EPA, and all of the, I'll give you a good example, and I don't have the name of the pesticide, but Trump, right after he was elected several months ago, and really not that long ago maybe, but he took one of the pesticides off of the restricted list. And guess what? 100 farm workers got poisoned with that same pesticide that he took off the restricted list a couple of months after he took it off, So, some of these decisions really have dire consequences.
Can you describe for me? Sorry, you go.
I was just going to say, we look at some of the executive decisions that Trump has made, and we think of the effects of those decisions that he's making. One of them, I guess, is and I don't know where this one's going, if they filed a lawsuit to stop it, but the idea of this is just recent, and like I really don't know where it's at right now, whether somebody filed a lawsuit to stop it. But in terms of them, I know what happened on the Farm Bill, but I think there has been some opposition from Republicans also that just happened, I guess, from the farmers about trying to restrict food stamps for people. And something to the effect about if people were like just immigrants and not citizens, that somehow they would have some restriction on food stamps. I may not have that exactly right, but I guess what happened right now is that the Farm Bill went down because finally some of the growers, because they're the ones that really make out financially with the Farm Bill, because when they give food stamps to people, this is a government subsidy that provides food for people, and the farmers are the ones that could lose on that one.
Absolutely. Like the growers started to push back because they realized they couldn't pay such unlivable wages without food stamps and other government programs. Like it was going to be a loss to them to have that loss for their workers.
No. That's idealistic. It's more like they're going to lose revenue from not being able to sell as much food to the government.
Oh, Lord. Oh, shoot. I'm glad you clarified that, and I'll be putting that in the story.
Well, that's what happens when you have a person of goodwill and good heart, right?
This is a really important question for me, and I hope it's not offensive to you at all, but I want to ask it. Can you describe for me a moment when maybe you failed to be inclusive? Did your movement ever make mistakes when working with other groups? Maybe there were people who could have been at the table that would have added power to your work, but were included too late or not at all. Can you speak to that?
I really can't think of that because both with the community service organization, which was the organization that Cesar and I came out of before we started the Farm Workers Union, we passed a law in California that you did not have to be a U.S. citizen to get public assistance. That if you were a legal immigrant to the United States, if you had your green card, that you could get public assistance. In order to pass that bill, which we passed in the 60s, we had to reach out to all different types of organizations to get their support. Starting with the Jewish organization, people from England, a lot of people who were here from different countries and especially a lot of them were older people that had never become citizens, but they were ineligible to get any kind of like old age assistance. And so we had to really form coalitions and get a lot of support from all different kinds of organizations, the Protestants, the Catholics, the Jews, evangelicals, etc. So we came out of that kind of a broad coalition and partnering with different organizations. And we carried that same philosophy with United Farm Workers. And as you know, we had this huge boycott of grapes. We had like 17 million Americans stop eating grapes so that the farm workers could get toilets and drinking water and the right to organize. So we had a pretty much kind of an open door policy that anybody could join. I think I will have one caveat in there, is that once we got a check from the Communist Party, and I think we sent it back.
Wait, say more about that?
I think we got a check from the Communist Party, and we sent the check back to them.
Do you know what decade or what year that was in?
Pardon me?
Do you know what decade or what year that was in?
I think it was in the 70s.
Okay. I appreciate that. Thank you.
And as you know, the Communist Party was very infiltrated by FBI people.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And so we were infiltrated also. we had, when we asked for Freedom of Information Act, we have including myself, and even back with the Community Service Organization, which was a really banal organization, that we had infiltrators, and in the United Farm Workers, we had infiltrators. And so when we asked for the Freedom of Information Act, we got all of these transcripts that we were given. Of course, most of it is blacked out, so you don't even know who the infiltrators were. But the government had, under Hoover, they had this whole organization where they would send people out to infiltrate other groups. And we were one of the groups that was infiltrated.
Do you feel like there was, so that's really interesting to me because there's an upset in DC right now, Washington DC, because the DC police were going undercover at the Surge meetings, which is the white accompanying group to Black Lives Matter standing up for racial justice. And we found that there was sort of undercover policing going on at these white allyship meetings. For you guys, when you learned about that mole, like, how did you respond? How did that feel? Do you know if there was ever a result of that leaked information?
Well, it wasn't so much leaked information because everything that we did was pretty public. But the bad thing was that some of these people that would infiltrate, I'll give you an example, would actually try to, we had a man in Berkeley, and he turned out to be an infiltrator, but he was always trying to get our boycott group there, our volunteer boycott group, to throw Molotov cocktails, to cause violence, So it was like they were trying to entrap us. Luckily, even though the people there were very young, they held to the notion of nonviolence. So they tried to provoke, to get us to provoke us into violence. But luckily, people, they stuck to their guns and wouldn't follow them. Later on, we found out that this young man who was doing this was actually an infiltrator.
Wow, that's really powerful.
So I think that's and people ask me, like, with our organization, and they'll say, well, how do you keep your information private? We said everything we do is public. All of our meetings are open to the public. I mean, like, we have public forums once a month with all of the organizations that we build, and anybody can come to those forums. I think the one thing you have to make sure is that you don't get taken over by people that have contrary views to what you do, to what your goals are.
What does that reflect on? What are some of the ways that you and Cesar Chavez found your leadership to succeed in that? Like, what were your tactics when you felt like direction or momentum was missing or waning? I'm curious on your thoughts on leadership in those moments.
Could you ask that question again? I'm sorry.
Yeah. Let me come back to it because I think I have it framed better a little bit later.
Okay.
Also, let me know if you're at all getting too close on time.
We can probably go for another 10 minutes if that's okay with you.
Okay. A quick question that I have is, 1 year ago, the Trump administration had 60% of American unions workers' supports. That support has fallen 15% in the past year in office, but I still find it surprising. I'm curious what your thoughts are on sort of. Can you explain this to me? Why is there a unity between Trump and union workers right now?
Well, I think that his jobs. I mean, his promise that he was going to create jobs. I think that's probably one of the main reasons that the union people supported him. And one of the things that I fault the Democratic for is that, and I should say the Democratic Party because I think the media has a lot to do with this also. But if you will remember, when Obama was president, that he was trying to pass a full employment bill, and he couldn't get the Congress to vote for it. The Republican Congress actually stopped his bill, and many other bills like immigration. They never took it out of committee. And so the Republican Congress, Mitch McConnell, and the leaders of the Republicans, Kevin McCarthy and Paul Ryan, all of them, they were basically what they were, and they said it publicly. And I think McCarthy said that one time too publicly. Kevin McCarthy, their whole aim was to win the presidential election. And so the full employment bill that Obama was trying to pass in the Congress, they couldn't even get it out of committee because the Republicans didn't care about giving people jobs. They were just trying to get the presidency, and that's what they got. And and I shouldn't say the Democratic Party, but either they and the media, I mean, most people in the country don't even know that the Democrats had that bill, that Obama and the Democrats had that bill in the Congress, you know? And if we look at Trump, every time he opens up his mouth, he's bashing Obama, he's bashing the Democrats. Now, Obama didn't do that. I mean, Obama, took over when we had one of the worst recessions in our history of the United States of America next to the Great Depression. And yet, when he spoke, he never blamed Bush, or never blamed the Republicans for what was going on in the country. He was very civil about it. So Trump, every time he said something, he's always bashing Obama, always bashing the Democrats, And I think the Democrats should have done a better job of saying to people, hey, look who caused this mess. It was the Republicans, right? Who's stopping this employment bill from going through? It's the Republicans. And so I think that's why a lot of working people, supported Trump. Because they kept thinking about, he's going to bring more jobs back to the country.
That actually brings me to one of my favorite questions I wanted to ask you, which is, in your I'm pretty sure it's the same Stockton, California, but you spent time growing up in Stockton, and right now there's a young mayor there experimenting with universal basic income. And I'd say that right now the idea of either a universal basic income program or a jobs guarantee program are two of the most important policy platforms gripping Washington's attention. I fully expect that they will be a part of whoever is the left's candidate for the presidency in 2020. What are your thoughts on this? How does this fit into your dream for an economic justice platform? Is it more about a jobs program, a jobs guarantee, a basic income program? How do those play into sort of a green collar economy transition? What do you think?
Right. All of the above. All of the above are important, and we could have to figure it out. We can't have a jobs program that is supplemented by people in prison. I believe that one of the reasons that we have this huge incarceration issue is because there are not enough jobs for people. So what do? You lock people up and keep them in jail because you don't have jobs for everybody. And as we're speaking about this, I think one of the issues that you need to mention also is the whole robot issue. I mean, when you have into a McDonald's, I can't remember, I was one of the states in the Midwest into a McDonald's, and the young man who was there could not let me order because I had to go to a machine and put in my order on the machine. And I said to him, can I just get my order from you? He said, no, you can't. You've got to order from the machine. All I can do is teach you how to order from the machine. So that machine is probably definitely displacing maybe one or two people at that McDonald's store. Or you go into the CVS pharmacies, a national drug chain. And again, they're already putting in robots to check you out. So, the more that we see that robots are taking over, and these are these are jobs that people, you might say, are able to go into, especially young people. And yet the robots are putting them out of work already. So I think it's a huge issue. If we want to have a capitalistic society, but we're at the same time eliminating jobs, how do we expect people to survive? And then again, and this is something important too, our minimum wage should be at $30 an hour, maybe $30 plus, because our minimum wage has not kept up with the cost of living. So people cannot, at the minimum wage that they're making in many states, which is $10 or $12, even $15, it's not enough money for people to be able to keep up with the cost of living. I mean, back in the day, and you can research this, but I remember that they said that 1/4 of your income should go for rent. 1/4 of your income should go for rent. Well, now it's almost now the same that it should be 1/3 of your income that should go for rent. So, rents keep going up and people can't afford to pay rent, It's crazy. Even in Salinas, California, which is a farmer community, this is where a lot of our vegetables come from, in the Salinas Valley, it's being gentrified. Who do they think is going to pick those crops? you know. It's not people that from the Silicon Valley that are going to go in there and harvest the lettuce and the strawberries and the broccoli and the celery and the spinach and all of these crops that we need to live on.
Absolutely. Um, okay. You work a lot with the younger generation of leadership as part of the Dolores Huerta Foundation. Do you find them having new concerns or changing ideas of justice than the conversations you were having at their age? In what ways are you excited by their leadership, and in what ways are you nervous?
Well, I think the one thing that makes me nervous is that, again, they're very politically naive. Unfortunately, when I do it, I think they get it. When we talk about Black Lives Matter, when we talk about the fact that police, we cannot allow police to keep on killing innocent people, but the next step is how do we change that? And the way that we have to change that is by changing some of the laws that give police, give them the license to kill people, and have clauses like reasonable cause. You know, if they believe reasonable cause to believe that their life is in danger, they can kill you. You know, and that could be anything, as we know, because all of these police that have been killing people, none of them are being sentenced, or maybe one or two might be, but the majority of them are not being sentenced. People have to file civil lawsuits against the police departments to get any kind of retribution. And so I think that, really learning about government is important and how it works. Learning how the Congress works is really important. And those are the things that I think are missing, and I think people really need to learn how our political system runs. How we make laws. And that, I think it's almost like how the political machinery works to make the policies or change the policies that need to be changed.
And to just really focus back on that question for a minute, what concerns do you see them facing that are different than the concerns or conversations you were having at their age? Like, do you ever feel like you might spend the day with people at the foundation, and then in the evening, people of other generations, and find that what people are concerned about, what they're worried about, are different, or is it the same conversation?
I think because I do a lot of lecturing at colleges and high schools, and the kind of questions that are coming from them are pretty much what everybody else is concerned about.
Okay.
They want to know how they can make a difference, how can they organize, and so I think that with young people right now, I think there's a lot of fear, and I think that's the one thing that we have to try to address and to teach the young people that you can overcome this fear, that we shouldn't let fear paralyze us. And I think we are seeing that with the leadership of the kids from the Parkland high school, where we have the deadly slayings in Florida. And you see a lot of leadership coming from them. And they are addressing the politicians directly. But hopefully that all of that, and this is what I like to say when I'm speaking, I say it's wonderful to protest. We've got to protest. We've got to go out there and we've got to do the march, but you've got to take that march to the ballot box. And I know a lot of young people, like especially at the high school level, they may not be old enough to vote, but they can go out there and they can canvass and they can tell people, the other people, to encourage them to vote. And I think that, to me, is at the heart of anything that we do right now. We've got to get people to vote, and we've got to, have them make an informed vote so they can learn the background of some of these politicians and do the research, which now with all of our devices that we have, it's so easy to do. But that, to me, is, again, at the heart of our democracy. If we have a situation right now where half of the people don't vote, especially young people, then we don't have a democracy. And we're letting, the greedy and the corrupt take power because we are not voting.
So that segues so nicely into what I'm worried about at times is that the political radicalism within my friends and within my generation are demonstrated online more than they are offline. I think the conversations we're having often lead to indecision and inaction, kind of the paralyzed feeling that you were describing that the Parkland kids are overcoming. And that's why for me, when I watched the movie Dolores, your time was portrayed as having been so constantly in action. You seem to have really maintained this focus and momentum. And I'm curious if you just have any more advice for leaders of movements hoping to stir up similar levels of activism today.
Yes, yeah. Number one, we want to make sure everybody gets engaged in one form or the other. If you can, canvas, if you can phone bank, if you can, put literature out, if you can talk to your friends or whatever, encourage them to vote. I'm thinking that every single one of us has got, to get engaged. And I've been quoting Robert Kennedy, Senior Robert Kennedy, Senator Robert Kennedy. I think when you saw the film, the last words that he said to the public, his last public words were, "We have obligations and responsibilities to our fellow citizens." And I thought, oh my God, what he said before he got killed. That was so important because it really means that all of us, each and every one of us, has to become engaged and not only vote, but also, make sure that we help and we get involved in some way, shape, or form. And that's the way that we make the changes. So we can want change as much as we want, but if we don't take action, then nothing happens. And the only way that we can change policies is by electing good people to office that will actually vote for good policies.
Can you speak for a minute more about Robert Kennedy? He was a really good example, I thought, of an ally to your guys' work who really showed up, and I think showed me. I was watching it and I was like, man, I want to see members of Congress showing up like this. I don't see that right now. What did he embody, and also how did you guys build that relationship? How did you get his attention?
Oh, well, actually happened. We have a gentleman named Paul Schrade, who was the Western Director of the United Auto Workers, and he was a friend of Bobby Kennedy's, and he also was our friend, with the United Farm Workers, and he's the one that brought Bobby Kennedy to Delano. And Paul Schrade is still alive. He was one of the people that was shot when Kennedy was shot, and he happens to be a member of my board of the Dolores Huerta Foundation. Oh, the other thing, though, I think is really important, especially for young people, is if your candidate doesn't win, that doesn't mean that you have to quit working. And I think Bernie Sanders' supporters are a really good example of that, because Bernie didn't win, and they were still viciously attacking Hillary Clinton. And I think that comes from just being kind of naive politically and not, again, understanding how the system works. I mean, if your candidate doesn't win, that doesn't mean that you throw in the towel and then you don't work for the next candidate that you can have access to.
Last thing I want to ask you about today. For me, I currently work at NCRC because I'm trying to educate myself in economic and racial justice work, because I always wanted to work in the sustainability movement, but to me, it's not going to be a successful sustainability movement unless it's an environmental justice movement. So the most special part of your career, the part that inspires me the most, is how you've impacted the framing of environmentalism into something that's much more intersectional and inclusive. If I was to take, one second, I'm trying to go back to that part in my notes. As an environmentalist, have you had any experiences working with environmental groups that still frame their work around white communities and white needs first, maybe without realizing their impact? when you do, or if you have, how do you ask them to do differently, or how do you broaden their work?
Yeah, that's a good question. You know, when I speak to environmental organizations, I always say to them, okay, so you don't have a lot of people of color in your group, go out and invite them, go out there and organize them, because as you know, people of color are often in the most environmentally degrading situations, you know, where they live, or the things that they're impacted with. But they say, well, we don't have any people of color. Well, have you gone out there and organized anybody to come in and help? And I had this happened many years ago, but I had been in this environmental conference with Tom Hayden when he was still alive. And then I asked my brother was with me, and I invited him to come. My brother was older than I was. So at this point in time, we're probably already in our 50s. And as we're driving up, this young man who had been in the conference all day long, I had seen him in the conference, and he didn't see me that I was in the car. And he said, he called my brother, hey, boy, get out of my way, or something like that. My brother is in his 50s. He happens to be a Latino, and you're calling him a boy? You know, that's like the kind of language that they use in the South against black people. And I was so offended by that. And I think we still have that inherent racism. It's so permeated our society, and that people don't realize that. And they have to check themselves, you know? They have to check themselves and their thoughts and their actions against people of color. And I think the environmental movement is still very white, because now we're talking decades now, right? Yeah, because they really haven't made an effort to go out there and to invite and to recruit people of color into the movement. Now, that's not true about all of the environmental movements, because I think Earth Justice, for one of the organizations, does have a lot of Latinos in it, or Latinos that are at the head of the organization. But some of the environmental organizations are still pretty white.
And the flip side of that question is, because there are very obvious barriers to entering the environmental movement, and it does remain predominantly white in certain parts of it, how do you persuade civil rights and economic justice leaders to prioritize the environment, to also make their own space within that movement the way I think you did?
Well, I think in all of these things that we talk about, in all of our movements, they've got to be integrated in a policy level way with all organizations. And when I say this, let me just kind of give an example. I mean, we work primarily with Latinos, but we have a component of our organization for LGBT. You know, we have LGBT organizers, because we know that in the Latino community there's a lot of homophobia, and so that we've got to change that. We just had our first Pride March in Bakersfield last June, you know, and we're very proud of that. And we have a queer prom. This is the second year we've had a queer prom for all the kids that don't feel comfortable when they go to their prom at their high school. And so that's got to be integrated into all of the work that we do. We've got to integrate women's reproductive rights in all of the work that we do. The environmental issues have to be integrated in the work that we do. We have the worst air quality in the nation here where we live in Bakersfield, California, and south of Bakersfield. So that means that we've got to work very closely with organizations that are doing environmental work, like there's a group called CRP, Coalition to Erase Poverty in the Environment, the Clean Water Action Groups, the Community Water Center, but they're working on water, you know, so that's got to be part and parcel of all of the work that we do. It can't be separate and apart. And I think all organizations have got to be, this has got to be part of the work that we do. And definitely supporting, especially right now in California, we're working on a bill right now. It's in the Assembly, it's being voted on right now as we speak. SB 623 to provide clean and safe drinking water for 3 million people here in the state of California. So it's got to be integrated in all of the work that we do, and we've got to, the people that we work with, that integrate environmental behaviors in their lives. You know, like getting rid of plastic bags. Okay, I was one of the people that was on the ballot measure. You know, to get rid of plastic bags. So it can't be separate and apart. We've got to integrate all of these causes into the work that we do. So, I mean, environmental organizations, I think they're sensitive to gay rights, they're sensitive to women's reproductive rights. They've got to be more sensitive to civil rights also.
Absolutely. What are the economic rights you hope to see in the future for workers, for women, maybe for Mother Earth, for our environment?
Well, I think one thing we've got to, I think to begin with, I mean, and a really big way to change a lot of this is to make sure that we elect progressive candidates to all of our state legislatures and to our Congress, people that are going to stand with us on all of these issues, you know? People are going to stand there and make sure that we have good policies that are going to protect Mother Earth and protect women and protect LGBT people and, you know, get rid of have a criminal justice system that really works and, you know, so somebody who really cares about the education. And when I mean education, I mean making sure that our education is equitable, you know, for all people. So, I mean, I think that's one of the best ways that we can all make sure that we get behind progressive candidates that are going to protect us.
To protect all of us, like don't support a candidate unless it has everybody else in mind also.
Exactly. And I think and sometimes sometimes when we get somebody that can do like, you know, 90% of it, not that other 1%, but then we have to try to push them over to I mean, we have a situation like that in our area here in the Central Valley of California. This is like the South. And so we have very conservative candidates that come up, and we have to pressure them to make sure that they help us in all of these issues.
I like that a lot. Anything else I should have asked you, but I didn't? That was a lot.
Yeah, I think you covered everything.
I really appreciate your time. I can send you guys a copy of the piece just to make sure it's all accurate and acceptable before it runs. Does that sound good?
That sounds good. Very good. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Awesome. And the last thing, I asked Luis if there was any photos from different eras of your work that I could use. I'm happy to use just things that don't have copyright online, but is there photos on the Foundation's website that are also okay for sort of nonprofit journalism?
Yeah, sure. I'll have them say. We have some really good photos. Like one of the things that we do with our community is to get them involved in community cleanups, you know, just going in the community and picking up trash, you know. And then we've had some of our youth groups that have done tree plantings, you know, in neighborhoods. So some of the environmental work. Then we've had some of our youth groups that go up to the mountains, up to the sequoias, you know, to replant trees or water trees that have been, some of the areas have been devastated because they've been cattle up there. And so they have to do plant trees, you know, where the cows went in there and they you know mowed everything down. So that's kind of part of the environmental work that we're also involved in.
Oh, cool. And so there's some photos of that on the website that I could include sort of, I'm trying to do this as almost a video journalism interview, so I think there might, or not video, sorry, photojournalism alongside these interview questions. So maybe if I drafted something up, I could send it to you and you could tell me if the photos we're using are okay and copyrighted correctly.
Yeah, I send them to Luis, and then we can send you some of our own photos that we don't have to worry about copyright because they're ours, okay?
Yeah, that would be really awesome. And I'll be there to hear you speak on Thursday, so if there's a chance, I'll come say hi, but this really has just been an awesome conversation. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, I do want to meet you because you're so intelligent.
Oh. Thank you.
All right.
I appreciate it.
Okay, you're welcome.
Bye.
Bye-bye.